The great council chamber floated in space above Centauri Prime, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. Inside, beings from across the galaxy sat in growing panic. The air itself seemed thick with fear, though each species breathed different gases through their personal life support systems. Ambassador Zektar of the Villani stood at the center podium, his blue skin pale with worry. His long fingers trembled as he activated the holographic display above his head. The image showed a star system, but where planets should have orbited, only empty space remained. "The Kepler system is gone," Zektar said, his voice carrying across the chamber through universal translators. 12 billion souls, all consumed in 3 days. A ripple of horror passed through the assembled delegates. The luminary representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystal shell, flickered anxiously. "How is this possible?" "Our defense fleets reported the system was secure just 1 week ago." Zektar's hands moved across the control panel. The hologram changed, showing security footage from the final hours of Kepler Prime. Dark shapes moved through space, each one the size of a city. They looked like living crystals, their surfaces pulsing with internal light. As the delegates watched, these creatures attached themselves to the planet's surface and began feeding. "The Void Swarm," Zektar continued. "We first encountered them 6 months ago at the edge of our territory. We thought they were just another space-dwelling species. We were wrong. The footage showed the planet's surface cracking like an egg. Massive chunks of rock and metal disappeared into the creatures' bodies. Within hours, the entire world was gone, consumed down to its very core. They don't just destroy," Zektar explained. "They consume everything. Rock, metal, organic matter, even radiation itself. And with each world they devour, their numbers grow." Counselor Yenna of the Tidal Lords raised one of her 4 arms. Her aquatic species required a water-filled environment suit to survive in the chamber's atmosphere. "What do our military advisors recommend?" Fleet Admiral Koss of the Galactic Defense Force stood slowly. His insectoid features showed no emotion, but his clicking voice betrayed his frustration. "We have tried everything. Energy weapons pass through them harmlessly. Physical projectiles are absorbed and converted to biomass. Nuclear weapons only feed them more radiation." He gestured to his own holographic display. "In our last engagement at the Proxima colony, we lost 47 warships. The swarm didn't lose a single unit. In fact, our attacks seemed to make them stronger." A voice called out from the upper galleries. "What about evacuation? Surely we can save some civilian populations?" "The swarm moves too fast," Admiral Koss replied. "They can consume a Class M planet in less than 72 hours. Our evacuation ships simply cannot remove entire populations in that time frame." Silence fell over the chamber. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, species that had mastered faster than light travel, controlled the power of stars, and created paradise worlds. Yet they sat helpless before creatures that seemed unstoppable. Counselor Vex of the Verdani spoke next. His tree-like form swayed gently as photosynthetic panels along his bark absorbed the chamber's artificial light. "Perhaps we could negotiate? Many species respond to communication." Zektar shook his head sadly. "We tried. The swarm shows no interest in communication. They exist only to consume. Our xenobiologists believe they are a hive mind, but one focused entirely on feeding and reproduction." "What about environmental warfare?" suggested another delegate. "We could poison their food sources or create artificial barriers." "They eat everything," Admiral Koss reminded the assembly. "Radiation, matter, energy. There's nothing we can withhold from them that they need to survive. And they thrive in the vacuum of space, where most of our species cannot operate effectively." The chamber erupted in worried conversations as delegates from dozens of worlds discussed their options. The ethereal collective debated in harmonic tones that made the air shimmer. The silicon-based crystalline empire communicated through controlled light pulses. The Aquatic Federation bubbled and clicked in their water-filled suits, but gradually the voices died away as the reality set in. There were no good options. "How long do we have?" asked the representative from New Geneva, a human colony world. Zektar consulted his datapad. "Our best projections show the swarm will reach the core worlds within 6 months. They're following the trade routes, consuming each system they encounter. Nothing we've done has even slowed them down." An uncomfortable silence stretched across the chamber. These were civilizations that had known peace for centuries. Their worlds were gardens, their people gentle and refined. War was something they had evolved beyond, or so they thought. "There must be someone who can help," whispered a delegate from the Peaceful Union. "Some species we haven't considered." Admiral Koss brought up a holographic map of the galaxy. "We have contacted every member world, every allied civilization. The response is the same everywhere. Our traditional military assets are inadequate for this threat." "What about the rim worlds?" asked Counselor Vex. "The newer members?" The Admiral's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Most rim species lack the technology for space-based warfare. Their worlds are primitive, their people adapted only to planetary environments." A small voice spoke from one of the rear seats. "What about the humans?" The chamber fell completely silent. Several delegates turned to look at the speaker, a junior aide from the Villani delegation. "Humans?" Admiral Koss's voice carried clear disdain. "Their homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world. The inhabitants are barely civilized by galactic standards." "But they have been expanding into space," the aide continued nervously. "Their ships have been seen in several systems. And their world, it's said to be one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy." Several delegates laughed. The idea seemed absurd. Earth was a nightmare world by galactic standards, covered in toxic oxygen, subjected to violent weather, crawling with aggressive life forms. Its gravity alone would crush most civilized species. "You want us to ask for help from barbarians?" scoffed the Luminary representative. "Beings who actually choose to live on that death trap they call home?" Zektar raised his hand for quiet. "Desperate times call for desperate measures. If conventional warfare has failed, perhaps we need unconventional warriors." "But they're primitives," protested another delegate. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their culture is violent and chaotic." "Yes," Zektar said quietly. "Exactly." The chamber buzzed with shocked conversations. The idea of asking help from such a backward species was almost insulting. These were civilizations that had created art forms spanning light years, had tamed black holes for energy, had achieved perfect harmony between technology and nature. Yet here they sat, helpless against an enemy that their advanced weapons could not touch. "I motion that we send a formal request for assistance to the human government on Earth," Zektar announced. "Seconded," called Counselor Yenna. Though her voice showed doubt, the vote was close. Many delegates abstained rather than officially support such a desperate measure. But in the end, fear won over pride. As the session ended and delegates returned to their homeworlds, many wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. Asking for help from the Death World barbarians seemed like madness, but madness was all they had left. The transmission would take 3 days to reach Earth through the quantum communication network. 3 days to discover if the galaxy's newest and most primitive members could succeed where all others had failed. In the depths of space, the Void Swarm continued its advance toward the galaxy's heart, unaware that something very different was about to enter the war. The quantum signal reached Earth 3 days later, piercing through the planet's defensive networks and arriving at the Global Defense Initiative headquarters buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains. The facility had been carved from solid rock, designed to survive everything from nuclear war to asteroid impacts. On Earth, you built things to last because the planet was always trying to kill you. General Patricia Kane was reviewing the morning threat assessments when the alert chimed on her personal terminal. As commander of Earth's off-world military operations, she had seen many strange things, but nothing quite like this. The message played across her screen, translated into Earth Standard English. A desperate plea from something called the Galactic Council. Alien races facing extinction from creatures that ate entire worlds. They needed help, and somehow they had decided to ask Earth. Kane called for her senior staff immediately. Within minutes, her office was filled with the people who kept humanity's expansion into space safe and secure. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived first, his lab coat still stained with coffee from his research into alien technology. As Earth's chief science officer, he had been studying every scrap of information they could gather about galactic civilization since first contact 3 years ago. Admiral Lisa Torres entered next, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Earth Space Navy. She commanded humanity's growing fleet of warships, vessels designed for the harsh realities of combat in the void between stars. "You all need to see this," Kane said, activating the holographic display in the center of her office. The alien message played again, showing images of the void swarm consuming entire star systems. The three officers watched in silence as worlds died, their populations helpless against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. "How accurate is this information?" Torres asked when the message ended. Webb pulled up his analysis on a secondary screen. "I've been monitoring galactic communications for weeks. They're not exaggerating. 12 star systems have gone completely dark. No signals, no survivors, nothing left but empty space. And they want our help?" Kane looked at the message again. "According to this, they've already tried their most advanced weapons. Energy shields, matter conversion, even something called dimensional displacement. Nothing worked." Torres laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me understand this correctly. The same aliens who wouldn't return our diplomatic messages for 2 years, who classify our world as too dangerous to visit, now want Earth's help?" "Because we're barbarians," Kane said simply. "That's exactly why they need us." Webb was already pulling up tactical data on his tablet. "Look at their weapon systems. Energy beams, particle accelerators, gravitational manipulators, all very elegant, very advanced. Also completely useless against an enemy that feeds on energy." "What about their soldiers?" Torres asked. "That's the interesting part," Webb replied. "Most galactic species don't have soldiers, not in the way we understand them. They've been at peace for centuries. Their military forces are more like police units designed to keep order rather than fight wars." Kane studied the tactical readouts. Where humans saw weapons of war, she saw the tools of a civilization that had forgotten how to fight dirty. They're fighting clean against an enemy that doesn't follow any rules. "Exactly," Webb said. "And these void swarm creatures, they live in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. Hard radiation, absolute zero temperatures, vacuum conditions. The aliens can't even operate in the same environment as their enemy." Torres grinned, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "But we can." Kane nodded slowly. Humans had been living and working in space for decades, not because it was easy, but because Earth had taught them to adapt to impossible conditions. Every human child learned to fight against a hostile environment from birth. She activated the secure communication system. "I'm calling an emergency session. We need to assemble a task force." Over the next 6 hours, the command center became a hub of frantic activity. Data flowed in from intelligence agencies, military commands, and research facilities around the world. Slowly, a picture emerged of what they were facing. Captain Jake Morrison was pulled from his assignment mining asteroids in the outer system. His experience fighting pirates and dealing with equipment failures in deep space made him perfect for the engineering challenges they would face. Lieutenant Amy Foster came from the Mars Gravity Training Facility, where she taught zero-G combat to Special Forces units. If humans were going to fight creatures that lived in space, they needed someone who could teach them how to win. Sergeant Chris Palmer arrived from the Luna Demolition Corps, bringing expertise in explosives that worked in vacuum conditions. His specialty was destroying things that weren't supposed to be destroyable. Dr. Rachel Stone flew in from the Australian Research Station, where she studied extremophile organisms that thrived in Earth's most dangerous environments. Her knowledge of biological warfare had already helped humanity deal with several alien diseases. As the team assembled, Kane briefed them on the situation. The holographic display showed the swarms advance toward the galactic core worlds, consuming everything in their path. "The aliens have tried everything their civilized minds can think of," Kane explained. "They've used their most advanced weapons, their most sophisticated tactics. All failures." Morrison studied the technical data on the void swarm. "They're treating this like a police action. Minimum force surgical strikes, trying to disable rather than destroy. That's not going to work against creatures that eat planets," Foster observed. Palmer was examining the swarm's biological structure. "They're basically living factories. Take in raw material, convert it to biomass, reproduce more units. Classic exponential growth model, which means they have the same weakness as any manufacturing process," Dr. Stone added. "Disrupt the supply chain or poison the production line and the whole system breaks down." Kane felt a familiar feeling, the same one she got before every successful mission. The moment when impossible became merely difficult. The aliens are fighting the wrong war. They're trying to preserve, to minimize casualties, to find a clean solution. "We don't do clean," Torres said flatly. Webb pulled up a comparison chart showing human military doctrine versus galactic civilized warfare. The differences were stark. Where the aliens sought elegant solutions, Humans embraced brutal efficiency. Where the aliens tried to minimize collateral damage, humans focused on total victory. They need monsters to fight monsters, Kane realized. And we're the only monsters they know. She turned to her assembled team. I'm authorizing the formation of Task Force Terran. 2,000 of our best people, equipped with everything we need to fight in conditions that would kill most galactic species. The team began planning immediately. They would need ships designed for combat, not exploration. Weapons that could operate in the harsh conditions where the swarm lived. Most importantly, they needed people who could think like predators instead of peacekeepers. The EDF Defiance is ready for deployment, Torres reported, along with the Resilience and Vengeance. All 3 ships have been upgraded with the new armor plating and extended life support systems. Morrison was studying the swarm's movement patterns. They follow the trade routes, hitting populated systems in sequence. That means we can predict where they'll strike next. Perfect, Kane said. We'll meet them there. As the briefing continued, one thing became clear. The galaxy had asked for help from Earth because they were desperate. They expected humans to fail, just like everyone else had failed. They were about to discover that humans didn't fight like everyone else. Dr. Stone looked at the images of consumed worlds. Entire civilizations reduced to nothing. They have no idea what they've just unleashed. Kane smiled grimly as she signed the deployment orders. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world, and why sometimes death worlds produced exactly the kind of life you needed to survive. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system, and Captain Jake Morrison immediately knew they were too late to save the 4th planet. Through the viewscreen of the EDF Defiance, he watched as massive crystalline creatures swarmed over what had once been a thriving world of 8 million people. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the tactical station. They're the size of cities. The void swarm creatures moved through space like living asteroids, each one pulsing with internal light as they fed. Where the planet's surface had been, now there were only chunks of rock and metal disappearing into the creatures' bodies. The world was being consumed bite by massive bite. Captain Morrison, this is Commander Yulin of the Vellani Defense Fleet, came a voice over the communication system. We are grateful for your arrival, though I fear you may be too late to save Kepler 4. Morrison looked at his tactical display. 12 Vellani ships hung in space at what they considered a safe distance, their elegant curves and gleaming hulls a stark contrast to the brutal functionality of human warships. They had been watching the planet die for 6 hours, unable to intervene. Commander, this is Captain Morrison. We're here to help. What's your tactical assessment? We have attempted 3 separate attacks, Yulon replied, his voice heavy with defeat. Our energy weapons pass through the creatures harmlessly. Physical projectiles are absorbed and converted to additional biomass. We lost 2 ships in our last attempt. Morrison studied the tactical data streaming to his screens. The swarm creatures were indeed massive, but they moved in predictable patterns. More importantly, they seemed to ignore threats until directly attacked. How long before they finish with the planet? Approximately 4 hours at current consumption rate, came the reply. Then they will move on to Kepler Prime, where 40 million civilians are attempting evacuation. Sergeant Chris Palmer joined Morrison on the bridge, carrying an equipment case that seemed too heavy for one person to lift. Captain, I've been analyzing the sensor data. These things have some interesting structural features. He activated the holographic display, showing a detailed scan of one of the swarm creatures. The being was roughly spherical, with feeding tentacles extending from multiple points on its surface. But Palmer highlighted several areas where the creature's crystalline structure seemed thinner. They're not solid all the way through, Palmer explained. There are hollow spaces here, here, and here. My guess is those are processing chambers where they convert matter to biomass. Lieutenant Foster was running attack simulations on her console. The Vellani have been trying to attack from outside effective range. Their weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat, not this. Morrison nodded. The alien weapons were indeed sophisticated, but they were built for civilized warfare between rational opponents. The Vellani tried to disable rather than destroy, to minimize casualties even among enemies. Humans had no such restraints. Commander Yulan, we're going to attempt a different approach, Morrison announced. I recommend you pull your ships back to minimum safe distance. Captain, with respect, we have already tried every conventional attack method. What makes you think you will succeed where we have failed? Morrison looked at his crew. Foster was grinning as she loaded nuclear warheads into the torpedo tubes. Palmer was preparing his specialized demolition charges. Dr. Rachel Stone was reviewing biological warfare protocols on her medical station. Because we're not going to fight them conventionally, Morrison replied. The EDF Defiance accelerated toward the swarm formation, followed closely by the Resilience and Vengeance. Instead of maintaining safe distance like the Volani ships, the human vessels plunged directly into the middle of the feeding frenzy. Multiple contacts converging on our position, Foster reported calmly. Looks like we got their attention. 3 swarm creatures detached from the dying planet and moved to intercept the human ships. Each one was easily 10 times larger than Morrison's vessel, their feeding tentacles reaching out like the arms of some cosmic octopus. Foster, hit the lead creature with conventional weapons, Morrison ordered. Let's see how they react. The Defiance's railguns opened fire, sending streams of hypervelocity projectiles into the nearest swarm creature. Just as the Volani had reported, the projectiles seemed to disappear into the creature's body, absorbed and converted to additional mass. But Morrison wasn't trying to damage it. He was studying its behavior. Interesting, Dr. Stone observed from her station. The creature's internal structure shifts to accommodate the incoming projectiles. It's not just absorbing them, it's actively reconfiguring itself to process them more efficiently. Which means it has to redirect resources from other functions, Morrison realized. Palmer, are you seeing this? Already on it, Captain. The processing chambers are becoming more active, which makes them more vulnerable to disruption. Morrison waited until the swarm creature was completely focused on absorbing the incoming projectiles. Then he gave the order that would have horrified any civilized galactic species. All ships ramming speed. Target the processing chambers directly. The 3 human vessels accelerated toward the swarm creatures, their armored hulls designed to survive impacts that would destroy more elegant ships. At the last moment, they released their cargo holds full of nuclear mines and pulled away. The explosions lit up space like miniature suns, where the Volani had tried to attack from outside. The humans had delivered their weapons directly into the creature's most vulnerable areas. The nuclear detonations didn't just damage the swarm creatures. They poisoned their internal processing systems with radiation that even they couldn't convert fast enough. First creature is showing internal structural collapse, Foster reported with satisfaction. Second and third creatures are retreating, but Morrison wasn't done. Foster, launch boarding parties. Palmer, get your demolition teams ready. We're going inside. Inside? Commander Yulan's voice carried shock over the communication channel. Captain, that is madness. No living being can survive inside those creatures. No galactic species can survive, Morrison corrected. We're not galactic. Lieutenant Foster led the first boarding party, 20 soldiers in heavy armor designed for the worst conditions space could offer. They cut through the wounded swarm creature's hull using plasma torches and entered the alien internal structure. What they found inside was a nightmare maze of organic machinery, processing chambers converting matter to biomass, and transportation channels moving resources throughout the creature's body. But Foster's team had trained for combat in the most hostile environments Earth could provide. It's like fighting inside a living factory, Foster reported over the tactical channel, but the environmental conditions are no worse than deep space mining operations. Palmer's demolition teams moved through the creature's internal structure, placing nuclear charges in critical locations. Where the Volani saw an unstoppable monster, the humans saw a complex system with multiple points of failure. Dr. Stone made the most important discovery. Captain, the creature's nervous system is quantum-based. It's using entanglement to coordinate with other swarm units across vast distances. Can you disrupt it? Earth's experience with quantum warfare gives us several options. I'm deploying quantum jammers now. The effect was immediate. The wounded swarm creature began moving erratically, its coordinated feeding patterns breaking down. More importantly, the other creatures in the system seemed confused, their hive mind connection disrupted. All swarm units are showing decreased coordination, Foster reported. Whatever Dr. Stone did, it's working. Commander Yulan watched in amazement as the human forces systematically dismantled creatures that had seemed invincible. How are they doing this? Our most advanced weapons failed completely. Dr. Stone's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional as she coordinated the biological warfare assault. Commander, your species evolved on peaceful worlds. You fight like civilized beings trying to minimize casualties. And you do not. We evolved on a world that tries to kill us every day. We fight like the survivors of a death world. We don't try to minimize casualties. We try to win. The battle for the Kepler system lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 7 swarm creatures had been completely destroyed and the survivors had fled toward the galactic rim. For the first time since the crisis began, the galaxy had won a victory against the Void Swarm. But the real revelation wasn't the human victory. It was how they had achieved it. Where other species saw unstoppable monsters, humans saw engineering problems. Where others tried to fight clean, humans embraced the brutal realities of war. News of the human victory at Kepler spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, desperate messages flooded Earth's communication networks. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity's existence now begged for help. The Crystalline Empire offered rare minerals. The Aquatic Federation promised territorial concessions. Even the proud Luminari sent formal requests for assistance. General Patricia Kane stood in the war room deep beneath Colorado, watching as tactical displays showed the expanding human campaign. Red markers indicated swarm infestations across dozens of star systems. Blue markers showed where human forces were engaging the enemy. For the first time since the crisis began, the blue markers were winning. "Ma'am, we have confirmation from the Vega system," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Dan Price. "Captain Morrison's team has eliminated another swarm cluster. 7 creatures destroyed, no human casualties." Kane nodded, but her attention was focused on the larger picture. The original Task Force Terran had been forced to split into smaller units as requests for help poured in from across the galaxy. Each human commander now led mixed forces of human soldiers and alien support crews. "What's the status on the biological warfare program?" she asked Dr. Rachel Stone, who had returned to Earth to coordinate the expanded research effort. Dr. Stone pulled up her latest reports. "We've successfully weaponized 17 different Earth microorganisms. The swarm's rapid reproduction rate is actually working against them now. Our engineered viruses spread through their hive networks faster than they can adapt." The breakthrough had come when Stone realized that the swarm's greatest strength was also its weakness. The creatures shared biological material constantly, passing resources between individuals to maximize efficiency. But this same process could carry diseases throughout their entire population. Earth's microorganisms were uniquely suited for this kind of warfare. They had evolved on a planet where life competed viciously for every resource, creating the most aggressive and adaptable pathogens in the galaxy. Captain Morrison has also reported success with the new environmental weapons, Kane continued, reviewing the tactical summaries. Morrison's engineering teams had been busy creating weapons based on Earth's most dangerous natural phenomena. Solar flare generators that could cook swarm creatures from the inside out, gravity manipulators that created artificial tectonic stress, tearing the creatures apart with forces they couldn't absorb, atmospheric processors that turned enemy ships into pressure cookers. But the most effective weapons weren't technological at all. They were tactical. In the Centauri system, Lieutenant Amy Foster had led a boarding action that lasted 3 days. Her team had fought through the internal structure of a massive swarm creature, using techniques developed in Earth's deepest caves and highest mountains. Where alien soldiers would have suffocated or been crushed, humans thrived. "The key is understanding that these creatures aren't invincible," Foster had reported. "They're just adapted to conditions that most galactic species can't handle. But we've been handling worse conditions our entire lives." The psychological effect on the galaxy was enormous. For months, every species had lived in terror of the unstoppable swarm. Now they watched as creatures that had seemed like forces of nature were systematically hunted down and destroyed by beings they had considered primitive barbarians. Commander Yulon of the Villani had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. After witnessing the Kepler battle, he requested assignment as liaison to the human forces. Now he found himself learning tactics that would have been considered war crimes by galactic civilization just months earlier. "Your species fights without honor," he had initially complained. To Captain Morrison, "Honor doesn't matter to dead people," Morrison had replied. "The swarm isn't interested in a fair fight. Neither are we." Gradually, Yulon began to understand. The humans weren't cruel for the sake of cruelty. They were practical. Every brutal tactic served a purpose. Every seemingly barbaric action was calculated to achieve victory with minimum human casualties. Your people have turned warfare into a science, Yulin observed during a strategy session aboard the EDF Defiance. Everything on Earth wants to kill you, Morrison explained. Weather, animals, plants, diseases, even the ground itself. We had to learn to fight efficiently, or we would have gone extinct long before we reached space. Dr. Stone's Biological Warfare Division had established research stations throughout human-controlled space. Each station was staffed with xenobiologists who studied captured swarm specimens, looking for new weaknesses to exploit. The fascinating thing is how predictable they are. Dr. Stone reported during a secure conference call with Earth. They're perfectly evolved for consuming matter and reproducing, but that specialization makes them vulnerable to anything outside their experience. Earth's experience with biological warfare was extensive. Humans had been fighting diseases, parasites, and hostile life forms for thousands of years. They understood biological systems in ways that more civilized species had forgotten. The quantum jamming technology proved equally effective. Earth's military had developed quantum warfare techniques during the resource wars of the previous century, when nations had tried to disrupt each other's communication networks. Those same techniques could sever the connections between swarm creatures. It's like cutting the phone lines, explained Dr. Marcus Webb during a technical briefing. Individual swarm creatures are dangerous but manageable. It's the hive mind coordination that makes them truly deadly. Human forces began deploying quantum jammers as standard equipment. Wherever they went, swarm coordination broke down. The creatures became confused, operating as individuals rather than as parts of a larger organism. Sergeant Chris Palmer's demolition techniques had also evolved. Instead of simply destroying swarm creatures, his teams learned to capture them alive and use them as biological weapons against other swarm clusters. We infect one creature with our engineered viruses, then release it back into the wild, Palmer explained to horrified alien observers. It spreads the disease to the entire local population before anyone realizes what's happening. The tactic was brutal, but effective. Swarm clusters that had taken months to develop could be eliminated in days through biological warfare. As the human campaign expanded, other species began requesting human military advisors. The Tidal Lords wanted to learn zero-gravity combat techniques. The Verdani asked for instruction in environmental warfare. Even the proud luminary requested human assistance in developing more aggressive tactics. We're not just fighting a war, Kane realized during a strategic review. We're teaching an entire galaxy how to survive. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had lived in peace for centuries suddenly found themselves learning the harsh lessons that Earth had taught humanity over millennia: how to fight in hostile environments, how to adapt when circumstances changed, how to win at any cost. But the most important lesson was psychological. The galaxy had lived in fear of the swarm because they seemed invincible. Humans showed them that nothing was invincible if you were willing to fight dirty enough. Your people have given us hope, Ambassador Zektar told Kane during a diplomatic meeting. For the first time since this crisis began, we believe we can win. Kane looked at the tactical display showing human forces engaged across dozens of star systems. Blue markers were steadily replacing red ones as swarm infestations were eliminated. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable were being hunted to extinction by predators from a death world. The galaxy asked for help, Kane replied. We're just giving you what Earth taught us. Sometimes the most dangerous problems require the most dangerous solutions. The tide of war had turned. The swarm still controlled large sections of the galactic rim, but their advance toward the core worlds had stopped. Human forces were pushing them back system by system, using tactics that civilized species would never have considered. Earth's Deathworlders were proving that sometimes civilization's greatest strength came from its most uncivilized members. 6 months after the first human ships had arrived at the dying Kepler system, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the EDF Victory, watching the final swarm creature die in the cold vacuum of space, the massive crystalline being pulsed weakly as Dr. Rachel Stone's latest biological weapon finished its work, dissolving the creature's internal structure from within. That's the last confirmed swarm presence in galactic space, reported Captain Amy Foster from the bridge. All sensor sweeps show negative contacts. The threat has been eliminated. Morrison nodded but felt no satisfaction. The war was won, but the cost had been enormous. 17 star systems completely consumed before human forces could intervene. Hundreds of billions of lives lost. Entire species reduced to scattered refugee populations. Yet somehow the galaxy had survived. And it was a very different galaxy than it had been 6 months ago. The victory celebration on Centauri Prime was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from every known species gathered in the great orbital station, no longer the elegant diplomatic facility it had once been. Human military engineers had reinforced the structure with armor plating and defensive systems. Even in peacetime, the galaxy now expected trouble. Ambassador Zektar stood at the central podium, his blue skin showing the stress lines that had appeared during the long months of war. Around him sat delegates who had learned hard lessons about survival, their refined civilizations forever changed by contact with humanity's brutal practicality. 6 months ago, we faced extinction, Zektar began, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. The void swarm seemed unstoppable. Our most advanced weapons failed. Our greatest minds found no solutions. We had accepted defeat. He gestured toward the human delegation, seated in a section that had been specially reinforced to handle Earth's heavy gravity requirements. General Patricia Kane sat flanked by her senior staff, their military uniforms a stark contrast to the flowing robes and elegant attire favored by other galactic species. Then we made a desperate choice. We asked for help from a species we had dismissed as primitive barbarians. We were wrong about many things, but we were most wrong about that. The chamber erupted in applause, but it was not the polite acknowledgement typical of galactic diplomacy. It was genuine gratitude mixed with something that had been absent from galactic politics for centuries, respect born of fear. Kane stood to address the assembly. Her speech was brief, direct, and completely unlike the flowery rhetoric usually heard in these halls. "The swarm is gone," she said simply. "Earth kept its promise. But the galaxy needs to understand something important. This won't be the last time you face a threat like this." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled delegates. They had hoped the nightmare was over, that they could return to their peaceful existence. "The universe is a dangerous place," Kane continued. "Earth learned that lesson long ago. Now you've learned it too. The question is what you're going to do about it." Dr. Marcus Webb stepped forward, carrying a data pad containing humanity's formal recommendations for galactic defense reform. The document had taken weeks to prepare and would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. "We propose the establishment of the Galactic Defense Corps," Webb announced, "a joint military force trained in extreme environment warfare, biological defense, and unconventional tactics." The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembly. Many species had never maintained standing armies, viewing such things as barbaric relics of a less civilized age. "Furthermore," Webb continued, "we recommend that all member worlds establish mandatory survival training programs based on Earth educational models. Your people need to learn how to fight, how to adapt, and how to survive when their comfortable worlds are threatened." Commander Yulan, now wearing the insignia of a human-trained officer, stood to support the proposal. His transformation over the past months had been remarkable. The refined diplomat had become a hardened military commander, his gentle Villani features marked by scars from boarding actions against swarm creatures. "The humans saved us by teaching us to fight like them," Yulan declared. "But more than that, they taught us to think like survivors instead of victims. Every species in this chamber owes its existence to that lesson." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species that had known only peace for millennia struggled with the concept of permanent military preparedness. But the memory of consumed worlds was too fresh, the fear of future threats too real. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The Galactic Defense Corps would be established, with Earth providing training officers and tactical doctrine. Human military advisors would be stationed throughout Council space, teaching other species the harsh lessons of survival warfare. But the changes went deeper than military reform. The galaxy's entire attitude toward danger had shifted. Where once they had viewed hostile environments as obstacles to be avoided, now they saw them as training grounds. Death worlds like Earth were no longer classified as too dangerous to visit, but as academies where soft species could learn to become hard. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. Earth's industries, designed to operate in the harshest conditions imaginable, suddenly found eager customers throughout the galaxy. Alien species wanted human-designed armor that could survive in vacuum. They requested weapons that worked in extreme radiation. They purchased survival equipment based on technologies developed in Earth's deepest oceans and highest mountains. Admiral Morrison found himself appointed as the first human member of the Galactic Security Council, a new body established to coordinate defense against future threats. His office aboard the orbital command station gave him a view of the steady stream of ships carrying human advisors to worlds throughout the galaxy. "It's ironic," observed Dr. Stone during one of their regular briefings. "We were considered too primitive to join galactic civilization. Now we're teaching civilization how to survive." Morrison nodded, watching as a transport ship departed for the Luminary home system, carrying human instructors who would teach energy beings how to fight in physical space. Another ship headed for the Aquatic Federation, loaded with equipment for underwater combat training. "They're learning fast," he admitted. "Faster than I expected." The transformation was indeed remarkable. Species that had been helpless against the swarm were now developing their own survival doctrines. The Verdani had created special forces units that could operate in environments hostile to plant life. The Crystalline Empire had developed boarding parties capable of fighting inside enemy vessels. But perhaps the most significant change was psychological. The galaxy no longer saw itself as fragile and vulnerable. They had faced extinction and survived. They had learned that even the most terrible threats could be defeated with the right tactics and sufficient determination. Kane received regular reports from human advisors throughout galactic space. The message was always the same. Former pacifist species were embracing military training with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. "They're becoming more like us," Kane observed during a staff meeting. "Harder, more practical, more focused on survival than comfort. Is that good or bad?" asked Dr. Webb. Kane considered the question while watching the tactical display that now showed human forces stationed throughout the galaxy. Blue markers indicated training facilities, research stations, and military bases. Earth's influence had spread to every inhabited system. "The galaxy asked for our help," she said finally. "We gave them more than they expected. We gave them a chance to survive whatever comes next." Outside the command center, space traffic flowed in patterns that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Heavily armed patrol ships from dozens of species maintained regular sweeps of their territories. Military vessels practiced combat maneuvers in the radiation fields around dying stars. Transport ships carried soldiers and equipment between worlds that had never known warfare. The galaxy had become a very different place. Harder, more dangerous, but also stronger. And deep in space, monitoring stations staffed by human-trained crews watched the void between galaxies, ready for whatever threat might emerge from the cosmic dark. The universe was still dangerous, but now the galaxy was ready to fight back. Earth's Deathworlders had done more than save galactic civilization. They had taught it to save itself.